Hello everyone, welcome to Life in All Its Beauty. Happy fall and September, starting to feel like fall at least where I live. Today's video is how to make these super cute knit pumpkins using a circular knitting machine. Alright, so you're going to want to grab some waste yarn, your actual yarn. I'm using Big Twist Anti-Pill in a gray. It's a lighter worsted weight yarn. A crochet hook in case you drop a stitch or need to do any repairs, a sewing needle, a cinnamon stick. I've got this short little piece for the stem, stuffing about twice as much as I've got here, stitch counter, and scissors. You're also going to want a 22-pin knitting machine. I've got the Sentro one here, but whatever one you've got, that'll work. We're going to start with casting on, and in order to do that, we're going to find that black pin there, and you're going to want that to be pulled up all the way. Then you're going to wrap your yarn so that you have your tail end going out the one side, and we're going to start weaving the waste yarn in and out of the pins and making sure that it catches on every other pin, and this will establish our base row, and then after that, then it's just easy cranking all the way. So once you've gotten one full round, and you want to make sure that it's going behind that last pin so that the next one you would go in front of is again that black pin. And then you're going to feed the yarn down through the tension ring and just start cranking. I did about 5 rows of the waste yarn, and this waste yarn was a little bit thicker. It doesn't agree with my machine very well, which is why you see me moving the machine with my hand as it gets caught. But that's just a little quirk of my machine and the waste yarn that I was using because I was being stubborn. So you just kind of got to figure out what your machine likes and how it works. Alright, so now that we're done with that, I'm going to put the waste yarn, like I said, I did about 5 rows. So we're going to put the waste yarn on the inside, and then I'm going to grab the tail of my gray yarn, the actual yarn color that I'm using for this pumpkin, and I'm going to put the tail right alongside that waste yarn tail. I'm kind of pretending that they are essentially the same piece of yarn, so you want to pick up where you left off. And then we're just going to keep cranking. I just do a few pins, and then I just do a very loose square knot, something that's very easy to untie because we don't want to keep the waste yarn attached. We're going to take it off at the end of this. And then you just crank. For this pumpkin, I did 60 rows, but this pattern is super flexible, and you can experiment with different yarns and different row heights and whatnot to change the size of your pumpkin. And this is super easy to transfer to the 40 pin or a 46 pin, I think the Addy is 46, 48 pin Sentro. Basically, whatever machine you have, you can make it work with this pattern. You just have to fiddle with the rows until you get what you like. Something I like to do as the tube gets longer and starts to drag on the table is I like to roll it up just a little bit, like you see here. That way it stays off of the table, and I find that I tend to drop fewer stitches this way. I've got 60 rows now, so I'm ready to take the gray yarn off and add the waste yarn back on to finish off the end of this pumpkin. At this point, if you prefer to just do a cast off where, use your sewing needle and pick the stitches right off, or just crank it off and pick up your stitches that way, you can do that here. But for this particular project, I just chose to do waste yarn. And so the way you're going to add waste yarn at the end of the project is the same way that we changed colors earlier, where you just cut off the gray yarn, and I left a long tail, that way I can sew up the pumpkin and make the sides of the pumpkin squished in together, so you'll see that in a bit. But I think I left like 1.5 feet. You don't need quite that much, but you definitely want to leave a longer tail, that way you can sew it up at the end. And as you can see here, I didn't end on the black pin like you're supposed to, or I guess technically to have a regular row. You're supposed to. I just kind of stopped wherever. Doesn't really matter. It's not a big deal. With this particular pattern, you don't need it to be super exact. And then you just keep cranking with the white yarn, doing that loose square knot like we did at the beginning earlier. And again, I did like 5 or 6 rows or something like that. And then to finish it off, I just took the waste yarn, took my end, put it in the middle of the project, and cranked my project off. So to crank it off, you just crank it around twice, and it'll just fall right off like you see it going here. Sometimes the yarn will get stuck on the last pin or two, which is why you see me manually taking it off there. So now I'm going to give the project a good stretch just to kind of work the tension out a little bit more evenly. And then we're going to fold the long tube in half so that both sides of the waste yarn are on the same side, just like I'm doing here. And you want to make sure that you have the right side on the outside, unless you deliberately want the other side to be showing. This way your pumpkin will look the right way. Now you're going to thread your needle, and we're going to start sewing the pumpkin so that it's cinching up on both sides to make that pumpkin shape. Because it's doubled, we're going to be sewing these two end pieces together, and then we'll also later go back and cinch up the top part of the pumpkin. But to do the bottom part, I tend to prefer to keep the two ends at the bottom. This is personal preference. You can change it however you want. You're going to take your sewing needle and you're going to put it into the top row of the gray. And we're going to alternate sides, going from the left side to the right side each time. That way we're making sure that we're not missing any stitches and it's all cinched up together in a way that keeps the two edges tightly together, which is a problem that I've had in the past. If I don't do this method, the two edges kind of make it very bulky and I don't like the way it looks. I'm at the point where I've gone all the way around. I've caught every stitch on both the top part of the tube and the bottom part of the tube, or, in this case, the left and the right. And I'm just kind of making sure that the waste yarn is out of the way. That way I can just pull it out entirely of the tube and I don't have to worry about, untangling any knots and whatnot. So to get the bottom part of the tube, you're going to want to undo that first round where, if you remember, like that base row, you just find where it starts and very gently, carefully pull it out, and then you could just pull the rest of it out on both sides entirely. At this point, you're also going to want to make sure that you did actually catch every single stitch because it's still easy to fix at this point. Give it a good little tug, make sure you caught everything, and then pull it all tight. I like to give it some good tugs at this point, make sure it's cinched tight, make sure it's even, make sure that I've got all the tension good, So you could see me here pulling it, stretching it to make sure that I've got everything actually caught and secure. And now I'm just going to tie everything together so that it doesn't come apart. And I just do a simple square knot for that. Give it a good tug. Like I said, make sure everything's nice and tight. I don't want it to come apart. Our next step is going to be to stuff it. So you can see I turn the tube inside out. Again, this is just a personal preference thing. Look at your tube, figure out which side you like better for the outside, put it on the outside, easy peasy. Then I find it easier to thread my yarn through, because the next step after we finish getting the main part of this pumpkin in is going to be to tie it up so that it's tight on the sides to get the pumpkin shape. So I find it easiest to actually sew through the stuffing like you see me doing here. And that just helps the, pumpkin keep its shape a little better as we're going to cinch it up tight to make the pumpkin shape. So use enough stuffing to fill out your pumpkin, but don't overstuff it either. Once you've got your pumpkin nice and stuffed, then we're going to sew up the top, and we're going to make sure we leave enough room to be able to stick our cinnamon stick in through the top. So we're going to take the thread, again, still on the needle, because we've used it to sew through the stuffing. And you're just going to find a row that's about halfway on your tube. And I like to pick up every other stitch. If you find it's a little bulky, you can try every third. I personally haven't tried it. You could. I just think that it's easiest to do every other. And I go around the entirety of this top part of the tube, and then I cinch it up just like we did for the other side, except that I make sure to leave a space for the cinnamon stick, as you'll see in a little bit. Alright, so you can see here how I make sure that I leave a hole big enough for the cinnamon stick. I literally just put my cinnamon stick in there, cinch it up as tight as I want, and now I'm going to move on to shaping the pumpkin. And I'm going to make 5 sections. So all I'll do is I'll take my thread, or my yarn, still that long tail that we left from, that we used to, cinch up the bottom to cinch up the top. And then I just take it and I wrap it around, stick the needle from the bottom back up through the top, and pull it tight. And this is going to be my first section splitter. You're going to do this a total of 5 times, making sure you're pulling tight each time, and that'll give you 5 different pumpkin sections. Make sure, though, that you still leave room for your cinnamon stick. I end up taking the cinnamon stick out usually after my first or second round, just because, as you can see here, it gets clunky and in the way and starts falling out, and it's just easier to take it out once you have an idea of how big you need that hole to be. Once I've made sure that the cinnamon stick still fits and that the pumpkin looks how I want it to look, I tie off my end securely, and then I take my needle and I sew the tail end through the stuffing a few times so that I don't have to worry about it coming undone and the tail coming out. Once I've got that done, I just clip the tail off and I'm ready to glue in my cinnamon stick. You don't technically have to hot glue in your cinnamon stick. If you know that you're just going to have this up on a shelf, nobody's going to be playing with it. It's just, there for your decoration and you don't have to worry about the safety or security aspect. You can just stick it in there and be done with it. But I want to make sure that my cinnamon stick doesn't fall out, and so I make sure I hot glue it in there so that it is secure. And there you have it. You've got yourself a machine knit pumpkin. Like I said earlier, feel free to experiment with different lengths and different yarn types, different machine sizes. I've done this with my 40 pin, my 48 pin, and like here, the 22 pin. And I've done a bunch of different rows. Here I did 60. I've done 40. I've done 45 on my 40 pin Sentro. I've done, I think, 55 on my 48 pin Sentro. And I think they all look super cute and it's really fun to make. So have a wonderful day and thank you for watching this video.